The days that followed Ira's encounter with the Alpha King became increasingly strange and disorienting. She found herself hyper-aware of every shadow, every shift in the castle's atmosphere, as though she was suddenly conscious of a presence that had always been watching her, waiting for her in the corners of the stone corridors. Her skin felt alive with electricity. Her senses, heightened to an almost painful degree, picked up on things she'd never noticed before. Thane Darkbane was everywhere and nowhere. She would be scrubbing floors in the East Wing, her hands raw and red from the harsh soap and cold water, and she'd feel his presence pass by not in person, but as a thrumming energy that set her teeth on edge and made her entire body come alive with inexplicable awareness. Her fingers would tremble. Her breath would come faster. Her heart would race with a mixture of fear and something else, something she didn't have a name for. She would be tending the gardens, her hands buried deep in the soil, coaxing herbs and flowers to grow despite the encroaching winter, and she'd sense him on the castle walls, watching from some distant vantage point she could never quite locate. She could feel his gaze like a physical touch, like fingers running down her spine. It made her shiver. It made her want to run. It made her want to stand still and let him look forever. She would be eating her meager dinner in the servants' hall in the evenings, a simple bowl of thin soup and hard bread, and she'd turn to find his eyes fixed on her for just a moment before he looked away. But those moments mere seconds of acknowledgement sent her heart into a frenzy that lasted for hours afterward. But he never spoke to her. He never approached her directly. He never did anything that would draw attention or suspicion. He was a phantom, present in absence, known through the feeling of being observed rather than through any concrete interaction. The whispers, however, never stopped. They continued their endless chorus, growing more frequent, more insistent, as though they were trying to prepare her for something monumental, something that would change everything. "He comes to your corridor every night now," they told her during one of her sleepless nights. His wolf paces like a caged beast. His animal does not understand why it cannot claim you. He is accustomed to taking what he wants, to commanding every creature in his kingdom. And yet with you, he hesitates. He waits. He watches. His control is slipping. Why? Era asked them one night, her voice barely a whisper in the darkness of her small room. She sat on her narrow bed, wrapped in her thin blanket, speaking silently to voices only she could hear. What do I have that he could possibly want? I'm nothing. I'm less than nothing. Everything, the voices responded, their tone absolute and certain. You have an ancient wolf, Era Sylvain. A wolf so old, so powerful, that it predates this kingdom, this continent, this entire age of the world. Your bloodline walks with the voice Wakursa, the first wolves, the ones who sang reality itself into existence when the world was young. And his wolf knows this. It recognizes you in the way that some creatures recognize their other half, their missing piece. It claims you on a level that transcends choice or reason. But he will not let himself have you, another voice added, sounding almost sympathetic. Because you are less than what he deserves. Or at least, that is what he tells himself. That is what his pride, his responsibility, his duty to the kingdom demands. He cannot be with a wolfless servant. It would destroy everything he has built. It would undermine the very hierarchy that keeps the pack stable. The whispers were right about his visits. On the 7th night after the courtyard incident, after a week of constant awareness and heightened tension, Era finally gathered the courage to stay awake and observe him. She cracked open her door, leaving just a sliver of space, and watched as a shadow moved silently down the corridor. The footsteps were unmistakable now. She would recognize them anywhere. The Alpha King passed by her room, and for 3 full seconds 3 heartbeats he stopped directly outside her door. She could see his profile in the darkness, the sharp line of his jaw illuminated faintly by the light of a distant candle. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched into fists at his sides, the way his entire body seemed to be vibrating with barely contained power. His eyes glowed faintly gold, visible even in the dim corridor light. They were beautiful and terrible and utterly inhuman. He stood there, perfectly still, and Era had the overwhelming sense that he was fighting something, some internal battle that was tearing him apart from the inside. She could almost hear the conflict raging within him, could sense the struggle between what he wanted and what he believed he should do. Then, with what seemed like tremendous effort, what looked like an almost physical act of will, he forced himself to continue down the corridor. His footsteps resumed, moving away from her door, disappearing into the darkness. Era held her breath until she could no longer hear him. Then she closed her door and pressed her back against it, her heart pounding so hard she thought she might be sick. This happened every night for a week. Every evening, after the castle had settled into sleep, she would hear his footsteps. Every night, he would pause outside her door. Every night, he would fight some invisible battle and force himself to move on. And on the 8th night, Era finally worked up the courage to leave her room and follow him. It was foolish. It was dangerous. If anyone caught her following the Alpha King through the castle at night, they would assume the worst. They would think she was meeting him for some illicit purpose. They would call her names that were even worse than what they already called her. But something in her, something that wasn't entirely her own, was driving her forward. The beast inside her was pushing her toward him with an intensity she couldn't ignore. It was like being pulled by invisible chains, dragged toward a destination she hadn't chosen but couldn't resist. She followed him down the corridor, up a spiral staircase, and through a series of passages she'd never explored before. The castle was different at night, transformed into a maze of shadows and secrets. Torches flickered along the walls, casting dancing shadows that made it easy for her to stay hidden. Her bare feet made no sound on the stone floors. Finally, he stopped at a large wooden door that was ornately carved with symbols she didn't recognize. He opened it without hesitation and stepped through. Era followed, keeping to the shadows. The door opened onto a hidden garden. The garden was unlike anything she'd ever seen or even imagined. It was vast and overgrown, as though it had been sealed away from the world for a very long time. Ancient trees towered overhead, their branches gnarled and twisted with age. Moonlight filtered through the leaves in silver streams, casting everything in shades of silver and shadow. Flowers that shouldn't exist bloomed in impossible profusion, night-blooming jasmine, moonflowers, silver bells, luminescent roses that seemed to glow with their own inner light. In the center of the garden was a pool of water so still and clear it looked like liquid starlight. The reflection of the moon rippled across its surface, creating patterns that seemed almost intentional, almost like language. Thane Darkbane stood at the edge of that pool, and as Era watched from behind the shelter of a massive oak tree, she witnessed something that made her breath catch in her throat. He began to shift. His transformation was nothing like what she'd heard other wolves describe. Wolves were supposed to take minutes to shift, their bodies changing painfully, bone cracking and reforming, muscles tearing and rebuilding. The process was supposed to be agony, a necessary price for the gift of transformation. But the Alpha King's transformation was instantaneous, almost supernatural, almost like reality itself was bending to his will. One moment he was human, and the next, a massive wolf stood in his place, easily twice the size of any normal werewolf. Perhaps 3 times the size. His form was almost impossible in its perfection, as though he had been sculpted by the gods themselves. His fur was black as midnight, rippling like liquid shadow with an opalescent sheen that caught the moonlight. His eyes were gold, an ancient, burning gold that seemed to hold the secrets of the world, the wisdom of ages. His claws, when he extended them, seemed to be made of silver rather than keratin. And his presence, even in wolf form, was absolutely overwhelming, a pressure in the air, a weight of power that made Era's legs feel weak. The wolf that was Thane Darkbane walked to the edge of the pool and stared at his own reflection. And what Era saw in that moment broke her heart, because she could see the loneliness in his eyes. She could see the burden he carried, the weight of ruling a kingdom, the isolation that came with being more powerful than anyone else, with having no one to share the true nature of his strength with. Then, slowly, he raised his enormous head and howled. It was not like any sound she'd ever heard. It was complex, layered, filled with emotion and history and an aching, desperate longing. It was the sound of a creature that had every power in the world except the power to be understood. It was the cry of a being that was so far above all others that connection itself became nearly impossible. The howl echoed across the garden and seemed to resonate with something deep inside Ira's chest. She pressed her hand to her heart and felt that familiar sensation, the stirring of something ancient and sleeping, trying to wake. The wolf that was Thane Darkbane walked the perimeter of the pool, his massive form moving with liquid grace. And then, as though pulled by strings she couldn't see, he raised his enormous head and howled again. This time, Ira could almost understand the meaning beneath the sound. Where are you? Where is she? Why can I feel her but not claim her? Why does she exist just beyond my reach? Why does every part of me scream for her when I know it would destroy everything? Your Majesty. Ira's voice came out small and frightened, trembling with fear and emotion she couldn't quite control. And she immediately regretted opening her mouth, regretted revealing her presence, regretted breaking the privacy of this moment. But it was too late. Thane's entire body went rigid. His head snapped toward the sound of her voice, his golden eyes blazing with an intensity that made her want to run. For a momento, just a heartbeat of a momento, she could see the beast struggling to maintain control, could see the struggle between his human mind and his animal instincts. He looked ready to attack. He looked dangerous in a way that made her knees weak. Then, with a tremendous effort, the king's shape shimmered and reformed. The massive wolf retreated, pulling back into the depths of his consciousness. His human form emerged, his body shifting and reforming until Thane Darkbane stood before her in his human shape. He was completely naked, his powerful body rippling with muscle and power, his skin marked with scars from ancient battles. His golden eyes slowly faded back to a dark, penetrating gray that seemed to hold all the secrets of the world. Ira, he said, and his voice was like thunder given human form, like the sound of a storm about to break. What are you doing here? How did you find this place? I followed you, she admitted, her voice shaking so badly that she could barely get the words out. I shouldn't have. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll go a. Don't move, he commanded, and though his tone wasn't angry, it held absolute authority. The voice of a king who was accustomed to being obeyed. How did you know about this place? Who told you? I didn't know, Ira said, her eyes fixed on the ground, unable to meet his gaze. I had to see you. Your wolf was calling to me. Is that insane? Am I insane? Am I losing my mind? Thane's expression shifted, became something softer, more vulnerable. He crossed the distance between them in 3 powerful strides, moving with the grace of a predator. Ira forced herself to stand still instead of backing away, even though every instinct screamed at her to flee. He was so much larger than her, so overwhelming in his presence that being close to him was almost unbearable. It was like standing next to a force of nature, like being in the presence of something so powerful it could destroy her with a thought. He reached out and touched her face, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. His touch was warm, electric, sending shivers down her spine. You're not insane, he said softly, his voice dropping to something intimate and private. You're something far more rare and far more dangerous. You're a voice walker, Ira. One of the ancient ones. A bloodline that should have died out centuries ago but somehow persisted. And my wolf. He paused, his jaw clenching, his hand dropping from her face. My wolf recognizes you as his mate. But I'm wolfless, Ira protested, her voice filled with the confusion and pain that had haunted her entire life. Everyone Caesaro. Everyone is wrong, Thane interrupted, his voice sharp and certain. He turned away from her, running a hand through his dark hair, his frustration evident in every line of his body. Your wolf is sleeping, deeply asleep. It's been sleeping for your entire life, bound by magic older than memory. But it's there. It's ancient and powerful, and it's beginning to wake. I can feel it stirring. My beast can sense it. That's why. He trailed off, clearly struggling with how much to reveal, how much to trust her with. Why what? Era asked, stepping closer to him. Her courage seemed to be growing now that she was actually here, actually facing him. Perhaps it was foolish. Perhaps she was walking into danger. But she needed to understand. She needed to know. Because my wolf can feel it, he said finally. Because for the first time in 300 years, my beast is responding to something outside my control. It wants you, Era. It has claimed you, on some level that I don't fully understand and can't seem to stop. And it's tearing me apart. Era took a step toward him. Then take me. Thane's entire body went still. The tension in him became almost unbearable, a pressure that seemed to fill the entire garden. When he turned to face her, his eyes were gold again euro, completely gold, burning with an intensity that made her breath catch. Do you understand what you're asking? His voice was raw, filled with emotion he'd clearly been holding back. If I claim you as my mate, it will defy every law, every tradition, every expectation that this kingdom holds. You're a servant. You're wolfless a euro, or at least, you appear to be. The council will demand that I either release you or abdicate. Nobles will plot against us. Enemies will use you as leverage against me. Your life will be in constant danger. You will be hunted. You will be despised by many. Your life will never be peaceful or safe again. My life is already in danger, Era said, her voice gaining strength. I can feel it. The rogue packs are coming, and they're coming soon. I can hear them, all of them, calling for war and blood and conquest. I need you. Not because you're the Alpha King. But because your wolf understands mine, and I don't think I can survive what's coming alone. I'm drowning in the voices, in the visions. And you're the only thing that makes sense to me anymore. For a long moment, Thane simply looked at her. She could see the war playing out across his face euro, duty versus desire, responsibility versus love, the weight of a kingdom versus the need of his own heart. And slowly, so slowly it seemed almost inevitable, he moved toward her and pulled her into his arms. It was a gentle embrace, but it felt like he was holding his entire world in his hands, like he was afraid to let go, like letting her slip away would be the death of him. There's a ceremony, he said, speaking into her hair. His voice was muffled but intense. An old tradition, one that predates the current laws and customs. A mate bond, forged in private, recognized by the ancient magic itself. It would bind us in a way that even the council couldn't undo, that no law could break. It would make you mine, completely and utterly, in a way that the formal ceremony never could. But I need to warn you euro, once that bond is made, you'll be bound to me forever. There's no taking it back. There's no way to undo it. And when your wolf finally awakens. He didn't finish the thought. But Era understood. When her wolf awakened, she would be fully transformed. She would no longer be wolfless. And she would no longer be able to hide. The entire kingdom would know what she was. And if her wolf was truly as ancient and powerful as everyone seemed to believe, the consequences would be enormous. When? She asked, pulling back just enough to see his face. 3 weeks, he said. His gray eyes held infinite sadness and infinite determination all at once. The council meets to discuss the formal mate ceremony in 3 weeks. I'll perform the ancient binding just before the official ceremony. It will be my way of declaring to the entire kingdom that you are mine, that I've chosen you, that I'm willing to face any consequence to be with you. What about the council? Era asked. What about the nobles? Won't they try to stop it? Undoubtedly, he said. His hand came up to cup her face again, his thumb stroking her cheekbone gently. If the council finds out I intend to bind myself to you before the official ceremony, they'll try to stop it. They'll do everything in their power to prevent it. They'll question my sanity. They'll demand I release you. They'll threaten me with all manner of political consequences. But by the time they realize what's happening, it will be too late. The ancient bond cannot be broken. Once it's made, you're mine, and I'm yours, and the entire kingdom will have to accept it. Let them, Era said with more confidence than she felt. I'm not afraid of them anymore. But as Thane pulled her closer and pressed his lips to her forehead in a gesture that was both tender and possessive, Era realized she was lying. She was terrified. Not of the council, or the nobles, or even the rogue packs moving closer every day. She was terrified of what would happen when everything changed. Because it was going to change. It was inevitable now. The moment Thane had acknowledged her, the moment his wolf had recognized hers, the entire course of the future had been rewritten. And she had no idea if she'd survive the transformation that was coming. #the garden meetings. Over the next 2 weeks, Era found herself visiting the hidden garden almost every night. Thane would be there waiting for her, and they would spend hours together in that sacred place, learning each other, speaking about things that mattered, exploring the connection that had drawn them together. He told her about his Euro, about taking the throne at the age of 20, about the responsibility of ruling a kingdom, about the loneliness that came with being more powerful than anyone else. He spoke of the burden of his beast, of constantly fighting to maintain control, of the sacrifices he'd made for his people. She told him about her Euro, about growing up as a rejected Omega, about the constant mockery, about the voices that had guided her through the darkness. She spoke of her dreams, the visions she'd seen, the fear that she was going insane. And he held her through it all, his strength anchoring her, his presence steadying her. One night, as they lay together beneath the stars on the soft grass of the hidden garden, Thane took her hand and placed it on his chest. "Can you feel it?" he asked. "Can you feel my heartbeat?" "Yes," Era whispered. "That beats for you," he said. "Every single rhythm, every Euro, it's calling to you. My wolf marked you as his mate the moment he saw you. And that mark runs deeper than blood, deeper than bone. It's woven into the very fabric of my soul." She placed her other hand on his chest as well, feeling the steady, powerful rhythm beneath her palms. And in that moment, Era understood something fundamental: she was no longer alone. She had found her place in the world. She had found her purpose. And it terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. #cliffhanger. The night before the formal mate ceremony was set to be announced, Era woke in her small room with a start. Her entire body was trembling, and her mind was filled with a vision so vivid, so powerful, that it took her several moments to realize it was a vision and not something actually happening. She saw a hall filled with wolves. She saw herself standing beside the Alpha King. She saw Karen stepping forward with a cruel smile on her face. And she saw something else, something that made her blood run cold. She saw another figure stepping out of the shadows. A woman with dark hair like her own, with gray eyes that matched hers exactly. A woman who wore robes that seemed to shimmer with ancient magic. And the woman's voice, when she spoke, carried an echo of recognition and terrible purpose. *The bloodline awakens. And I have come to claim what is mine. Era sat up in bed, gasping for breath, her heart pounding. The whispers in her mind had gone silent, an absence so profound it was almost painful. And in that silence, Era realized something that chilled her to her core. The ceremony tomorrow would not go as planned. Something was coming. Something ancient and powerful and connected to her bloodline in a way she didn't yet understand. And when it arrived, everything would change forever. The Alpha King's wolf might have claimed her as his mate. But Era was beginning to realize that there were other forces at work, other powers that wanted a piece of her, other beings that had claims on her that predated even her own life. The real danger, she now understood, wasn't coming from outside the kingdom. It was coming from her own past.